Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us for this special keynote address during our summit here at Inagene. We have the honor and privilege of having a close friend of mine and a mentor of mine, Suneet Varma, who is the president of Pfizer's US and Global Oncology business. And I've been fortunate to know and work with Suneet over the last 10 years in various roles at Pfizer and come to know him as a really impressive and forward-looking leader and someone who has an interesting perspective on multiple roles and the evolution of a career over time. And I think we're going to have some great learnings today from Suneet as he describes his journey and his learnings along the way that hopefully we all can take something away from. So welcome, Suneet.
No, thank you so much, Howard. Thank you for your kind words, and I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So let's just start with your career. I knew you in 3 or 4 different roles, and I know you've had many before and after. When you think about spanning these various roles, what are the common threads or similarities that you've observed across these positions? And then sort of as you talk about those, how do you translate these skills and capabilities from role to role so that you build on them over time?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, you made a comment about the 3 or 4 roles that I would have had, and that's exactly right. Just for background for the viewers or the audience, is that I have had a rotational view of development. And I've had the opportunity to, obviously, as I'm now running oncology, before this, rare disease and gene therapy. Prior to that, our hospital unit, and even before that, our off-patent medicines, which was globally very significant, especially in China and the emerging markets. And so, where else can you be in a company and work in a hospital where the average price of a product might be the cost of a single bottle of water, versus when you're in rare disease, gene therapy, cell therapies, or oncology, where the price tags can be in the millions of dollars. So really an amazing range of experiences that I've had the good fortune and privilege of rotating through. What I would say is that is, let's say, the first observation I have around the thread of how I've grown in my career. And that is that I have moved horizontally across as a leader across many different types of businesses. And I brought with me my skills in leadership and my skills in management and really, let's say, operating and driving businesses. And when I arrive in those different businesses, I match up with people who are verticals in those groups, meaning that they have worked in those areas for a long time and they have not only a commitment to those spaces, but a depth of subject matter expertise. And so, my horizontal combined with their vertical, I always say makes a T. And that letter T is what, when you put the two together, unleash the power of what can really be accomplished by a high-performing organization. If you have only horizontals, then you don't have, let's say, the depth of knowledge you would need to be successful. If you have only verticals, you don't benefit from the cross business or cross-functional experiences and practices. So I always believe that putting those two together and recognizing that is sort of my common approach to when I move into these different businesses, and that has led me to be quite successful, and my organizations to be successful in turn. Now, of course, there are things that I look at. I happen to be a cultural leader. I'm a values-oriented leader, and when I go into an organization, I consider myself to be a culture builder, and I believe that culture is one of the features that can differentiate one organization from another. So that is absolutely something that is important to me. And it's not just because I like it, although we always want to be in a company or an organization that has a good culture, but I believe it's a differentiator and an advantage in terms of how you innovate, how you go to market, how you attract and retain talent, and ultimately build a successful organization. But the last thing I'll say, Howard, on this is that to be successful in this kind of environment, to have had the rotational development opportunities that I've had, has required a tremendous amount of agility and adaptation on my part. And I pride myself on having change agility and learning agility. and that is, let's say, somehow, you know, uncomfortable, but it's a good discomfort because you move into place, you have to learn new things, and then you leverage all the experiences you've had that come before it to quickly gain traction and create a new vision for that organization. And so for me, that has turned out to be a particular personal strength as I've moved around.
Thanks for sharing that. And I certainly have witnessed that as I shared over our time together. As you look back over 25 or 30 years, you developed the narrative, as you just described, about sort of what your journey's been. But if I could ask you maybe to go back 20 years and think about this concept of learning agility and how you might have applied that or built it for others who may be looking forward to thinking about their career and how they want to build it. Could you say a little bit more about learning agility? It's something that you have naturally, but is it also something you can build, grow, develop over time so folks can say, moving from one thing to another, how can I feel confident? What can I do to be able to sort of take the path that you took?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that the first thing is your expectation, and the expectations for yourself, and the expectation of your manager, and the expectation of your organization. I have this sort of personal rule of thumb, because I've moved around quite a bit, that the first 2 to 3 months in a role, you are underwater. You don't really know everything you need to know about the business, but you're learning at a very rapid rate. That's okay. That's what I meant when I said let's say, good discomfort. But then in the second 2 to 3 month window, you're no longer underwater. You're out of the water. You're, let's say, able to operate. You know the language. You know the positions. You have the basic knowledge, and that is, let's say, the second period. And then the third period is beyond that. Is now I'm, contributing in a much more radical way. So I think the first thing is you have to have this expectation that, hey, look, these first few months are going to be about deep and rapid immersion. The second period is this sort of homeostasis, and then beyond that, really contributing. So once you have that expectation, then you allow yourself the space to do what you need to do to go from, let's say, a novice in a particular business to being a strong leader and contributor. And for me, that deep, rapid immersion, which, you could argue 2 to 3 months or 4 to 6 or some period like that, comes in a couple of dimensions. How do I know the people? How do I get to know the products? And how do I get to know the plans? And when I look at the people, products, and plans, you have to say, okay, what are the things that you do? So, for example, a lot of people say, well, I got into a new role. I wanted to know the people. I did many one-to-one meetings, okay? And if somebody says I did 20 or 30 or 40, I say, great, that's a lot, and you have to do that. But how do you radically exaggerate that feature? So for me, I declare I will do 100 one-to-ones within 100 days. And therefore, I meet the most number of people I can cross-functionally and also skip level, meaning deeper in my own organization. So that really says, okay, now, because of course, everybody wants to get to know the people, but how do you get to know them in a much more impactful way? When it comes to the products, of course, everybody says, I'm going to do business reviews, I'm going to have people present, and I'm going to have Q&A sessions. But what things can you, again, do to take a more extreme position? So for me, in oncology, I read the PIs of every product. I read the whole thing from end to end. I unfold that little paper. I don't print out a PDF, and I highlight it. I look at it in its organic form, and then really everything you need to know about that product beyond what was in the business review. And lastly, you want to know the plans. Of course, we have operating plans and budgets, but you want to know how you go to market and how you show up, how with your customers or with your stakeholders. And so how do you make sure that you have your plans reflected back to you from outside people? And I think that that takes you, again, a step further, like reading your marketing plan, reading your budgets. You have to do all that. But how do you have your plans reflected back to you from your stakeholders? So I think that deep, rapid immersion can occur, and everybody will think that. But how do you build that muscle, Howard? Because there's some natural features I have learned, but really anybody can do it if they are deliberate and intentional in how they do their onboarding.
Great insights. And the one thing I take away from that is you said deep, rapid, but it still takes time, right? 3 months, 6 months. When you feel the pressure and you want to deliver right away, new role, big position, but you have to give yourself the time to go through the process and know, as you said, it's going to be hard in the beginning, and that's just part of the growing process to get you where you want to be. Maybe a more tactical question in that sort of taking over an organization, the 100 conversations in 100 days, and you're learning and seeing plans. But do you have a rule of thumb or any type of rubric to assess organizational health, organizational identity, as you're thinking about putting your stamp on or your thumbprint on the organization? And how do you know how to stay at the 10,000-foot level, the 20,000-foot level, where your role is, and not too much change too quickly? To make that assessment of sort of where you think things can be evolved, and how do you pick and choose how to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there are many lenses you can look at, and different leaders and all of us watching this would have different ways of looking at it, but I'll give you a couple of ways. And the first thing, let me just start off as a basic assumption for everyone, that it's okay to rely upon your judgment and your experience and your subjectivity. A lot of people say, well, I'm looking at the data. And of course you have to look at the data. Oh, I'm looking at the facts. Yes, I have to look at the facts. I'm looking at the metrics and the goals. Yes, we must look at all those. There's always a quantitative view of any business or any organization that you can look at. But you also want to use your judgment, experience, and wisdom. I always tell my team, it's okay. Tell me what you think. And they're like, well, I still have to. Oh, I'm like, that's okay. Tell me what you think, because you've worked for 10 or 20 or 30 years. And I want to know. And I want to combine, let's say, that qualitative view with the quantitative views. And those qualitative views can be ad hoc. Okay. They can be cultural scores. They can be pulse surveys, combined with the metrics, et cetera. That qualitative and that quantitative together marry up to give, let's say, a macro view of a business. And so that's one lens that I use in my approach to make sure that I'm assessing where things are. But the other lens is this internal versus external. I think that generally speaking, larger organizations tend to be more internally focused. They tend to be more biased to working inside the four walls of their organization. And I think it's very important to go beyond the four walls of your organization and have an external lens. So, of course, you can talk to a customer. In my area, I can talk to a patient. I can talk to an advocacy group. I can go talk to a hospital system. I can go talk to a payer. I can also talk to regulators. If you think about any business you're going into, the assessments that you do internally must be balanced with the external viewpoints, because oftentimes they will either reinforce what you've heard internally, and that's good validation, but they can also contradict or reshape what you heard internally. And so I always make it a point to go externally. Howard, I recently had to do a 360 review. And you have these people in the company, and they say, okay, I'm going to survey your direct reports, I'm going to survey your peers and survey your managers. And I made them add a cohort of external stakeholders to that 360, because I wanted to know how the external stakeholders saw me and saw our organization. And let me tell you, it was the most different view from the other views. So that really shows how you can do a very good assessment. The last thing I'll say on this one is, I think every leader, when they're doing these assessments, whatever lenses you use, whether it's the internal versus external or the marrying of the qualitative with the quantitative, the way I described it, is that as a leader, you have to think about where you can uniquely add value. I often look at where I can add value that no one else can add value, because either I'm in a position uniquely heading up a global organization, or I'm in a position having uniquely worked on other areas, like in the hospital unit, oncolytics were one of our top 3 or 4 subcategories. So I think that always thinking about how you can add value uniquely on top of all the other team members is also another way of not only assessing, but elevating the team's performance.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I think that your add of an external perspective and an external lens may be very helpful for a lot of the folks watching today, as they're trying to figure out exactly where they think their organization is and opportunities. So maybe we'll take a little bit of a tack now into a more tactical business sort of set of questions. One of the things that global leaders are charged with is change management as new technologies and new opportunities come to the organization. So I'm going to ask the question sort of backwards, thinking about a digital strategy. How do you get your team aligned to a change that you may want to make specifically around bringing digital into an organization or evolving it? But before we get there, how do you define digital maturity in general? So how do you think about it at the organizational level? And then once you're there and you want to evolve it, how do you bring the whole team along in something that is new and different? Could be scary to some folks because it may be impeding on their role, or they don't know how to leverage it, or they may not be as advanced as the rest of the folks on your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just say that digital and technology is one of those spaces that moves faster outside of Pfizer than it moves within Pfizer. Sure. I always say that Pfizer is kind of a second wave or third wave technology company, and partners, Howard, such as yourself, there are really the beacons that we should be following in this space. So we really rely upon those partnerships to take us where we need to be. But you're right. How do I look at digital maturity? I look at in the sense of integration and also innovation. And when I say integration, meaning that my way of looking at how mature we are digitally is how well integrated digital is into our marketing plans, our sales plans, our customer plans, our go-to-market activities. And to the degree that it's embedded in the core of how we operate, then it becomes the table stakes of all the ways that we successfully operate and drive our business. So that integration is another way of saying how mature we are digitally. And I think that's one of the things that I look at when I'm working with oncology and looking at all our different teams. However, there is another side to it too, which is there's so much innovation, to my earlier point about how fast digital moves outside the company, that sometimes they cannot come in as integrated into the plans. They actually have to come in as, let's say, a platform or a capability that we're developing that's either inside the company or outside in a partner that we incubate, nurture, and then we apply it. And so I think that depending upon what type of digital opportunity there is, it can be highly integrated, let's say something that's established, or if it's something so novel and so new, it is not yet integrated, it's innovative, but it needs to be, let's say, grown and then later can be integrated. So I kind of have that way of looking at it, integration and innovation. Integration, how we do things already, and innovation, what are the next things that we plan to do?
So that's a really interesting answer and perspective. I was having a debate with a couple of colleagues a couple of weeks ago talking about a client, and the notion was that some were arguing digital is its own strategy and has its own sort of world, and others were arguing it's an enabler of the business. And I think, and maybe you could just reiterate what you just said, is it's actually both, depending on where you are in the organization role-wise or where you are maturity-wise. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Exactly, Howard. You picked up exactly where I was going. And that is, I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's absolutely both, because it's an enabler to the degree that's integrated in your business. And it should be part of everything you do. And, like media at one point on television was its own COE, let's say direct-to-consumer advertising in the United States, or how we do call planning. At some point, those were new innovative things that were outside of our business, but then they came in and they became integrated and they became part and parcel of everything we do every day. So I think of, in that scenario, digital is, it's not its own strategy, rather it's an enabler to the strategies we already have. It's an acceleration of our impact on the strategies that we already wish to execute. However, it is also a capability that stands alone, because there are new things that are coming in the life cycle that need to be greenhoused and proven and tested and then be integrated. So at any moment in time, I believe an organization, when you look at its digital let's say, strategic plan, will have things that are embedded and you don't even think about them because they're second nature and they're somehow known and established, and our talented marketing and sales people know how to use them. But then there are going to be new things that they don't. And those have to be thought of as a standalone in a capability and a platform, perhaps, and then you use partnering to incorporate, and maybe sometime in the future, they will become an enabler, but in the beginning, they can be standalone also. So it just, that's the, let's say, the virtuous cycle of development and advancement I think we have in the space as digital, let's say, hits Pfizer Oncology.
Perfect. Thanks very much. I appreciate the insight and the perspective there. Again, another little tack here into the business space, but I'm very curious in the oncology world, as you think about portfolio development and also pressure for growth and sort of to drive the top and bottom line while you're nurturing sort of what you have in your pipeline in your portfolio, and Pfizer has cash available for acquisitions. How do you think about the balance of organic or inorganic growth? What are sort of the things, the markers that you think about as you're just trying to decide, are we going to invest externally or put more internally in developing a full portfolio with all the different pressures? If you had all the time in the world, you might do it one way, but you have external stakeholders, you have patients who are waiting, you have a development team. What are the things that go into that decision making around organic or inorganic, or the balance as you build your portfolio?
Yeah, I would say that my vision is to be agnostic to the source of the innovation. Okay. And that means that I should be having a contest of ideas. And some of those best things will come from internal groups, but some will come from external partners or from the marketplace. Internal, we can, let's say, build and develop them ourselves. External, we may have to acquire or license or partner or collaborate somehow to have the impact. And if you think about technology ultimately as an enabler, like I want to achieve X or Y, then you are not concerned about where the innovation comes from. And let me just say, when I say innovation, there's scientific innovation, which drives research and development in our pipeline, but there's also commercial innovation or medical innovation, which drives how we go to market with customers. Equally important innovation, because one is bringing products to market and the other one is delivering those products to the market. And I think so when I'm looking at it, I'm looking for where are the best ideas coming from and where am I trying to have an impact. And if I'm trying to, let's say, have a new suspicion tool for diagnosing a rare tumor, or I'm trying to do patient finding for either clinical trials or patient finding for application of a new targeted therapy, then that's the goal and that's the strategy. And then I look, okay, how can I achieve that in the fastest high impact way? And sometimes that innovation could be sourced internally, but sometimes it has to be sourced externally. And so, it's really both. And you have to have really an open mind or open sourced approach to innovation, regardless of where it comes internally and externally. And I think that's what happened when we acquired CGen, which used to be known as Seattle Genetics, and we moved oncology at Pfizer into a more complex biologic space. But it also is how we're going to market now in our commercial oncology business. And we're looking at, and I won't name the names, multiple, I don't want to say let 1,000 flowers bloom, but let's say let 100 flowers bloom by finding companies that, okay, we go to no and low C doctors. Oh, we are a portal which aggregates information across manufacturers. Oh, we are an agency that can do A, B, and C for you. And you put those together, and as leaders, it's our not only, let's say, an opportunity, but it's frankly our responsibility to be agnostic in a way, and be, or better said, to be open source to how we bring that innovation forward to drive the business.
That's great, and a number of key phrases that I think folks can take away to remember the insight there. As you think about lots of different opportunities and not having a bias, but keeping an open mind, if you will, being agnostic. And interesting, you listed the notion of these 100 flowers. How are you thinking about all of the different things that you would bring to bear to leverage opportunity? Maybe we'll end the conversation with the topic of the day, and which will maybe be the topic of the next number of years, one around AI, Gen AI, and machine learning. And certainly broad applications, many across research and development technology in the pharma space and the healthcare space. First of all, before we sort of get specific, just give me your general thoughts on AI and its implications and potentials for the healthcare industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no denying AI is a new frontier for transformation. And a lot of people sometimes say about Pfizer or Pfizer Oncology, oh, you need to take risks, you need to go into new frontiers. Or I said, we are pioneering in science all the time, right?
Sure.
So, and we do it with ADCs or antibody drug conjugates, we do it with bispecific antibodies, we do it with so many different things. And somehow it's very natural and comfortable for us. Like we look at that and say, that's our bread and butter, that's our reason for being. However, when it comes to AI or let's say technology-driven innovation, we are sort of in a moment excited by it. So there's no question about, let's say, the cultural identity that could be driven by AI for a company like Pfizer. But we are somehow trying to think about how to truly apply and unlock its potential. And that is not so clear to us. Right now, people are saying, oh, I'm summarizing my emails, or I had it review a presentation, or even people have done funny things like, let me write a poem for me that I can use in my speech to talk about how I'm inspired by patients. All of those are fantastic applications. And frankly, we all gaze in wonderment and awe at AI and say how this could be. I think where I'm really looking, though, is, okay, how can it be, as we talked about earlier, Howard, an enabler to our business? How can it be a core platform that we can use on a repetitive basis to take our business to the next level, to take our science to the next level? And I think that excitement that we have needs to also be contrasted with the practical reality and the practice of how we apply the impact of AI. So I think that's where I am on AI. So, excited, intrigued, the initial things I've seen are very excellent, but I need it to be, sort of more in the practice of how do we drive our business and how do we achieve great things that we never previously thought we could do.
Sure. Absolutely. I also am sometimes a bit overwhelmed at the topic. We do our AI hackathons, if you will, and it's really coming up with the use cases and prompts in the new world. And the list on the wall becomes very long and then overwhelming. And how do you then whittle down and make a bet? But I suspect that folks after us will have figured all of that out as we go.
Yeah, and Howard, you're exactly right. I will just give you one, let's say, personal observation, and that I think about oncology at Pfizer. If I oversimplify and just say there's upstream and then there's downstream. Upstream is the research development. How do I find new and the downstream is how do I go to market? How do I deliver these things commercially and medically to our customers? Right now, I see the excitement to be high on all fronts, but the application is coming faster on the upstream components. In other words, when you think about a molecule design, you're using AI to say, how could I, in this chemical construct, find more on-target effects? And how can I reduce the off-target effects or the side effects that I might not want? And if you were to do this dynamically and digitally, could you compress the cycle time of development by years, potentially? Could I dramatically increase my success rate from where it is now, which is, let's say, organic bench science, to using AI? So I think that I've seen that on the upstream domain, the excitement is, let's say, no higher than it is downstream, but the practice of the application seems to be moving a bit faster and is clearer to us. Whereas downstream, I am still looking for what is the way that I can make this into not only a high impact area, but deliver on the promise and the expectation that we all have. And so that's what I'm looking for the future.
Fantastic. Well, we'll hope to partner with you and many of your peer groups to help figure that out. So let me first of all say thank you very much for taking a few minutes to share your journey, your experiences, and your insights. It's a fascinating career, as you described, with so many different stops, and I'm not sure one that maybe you thought of, X number of years ago where you'd be. And hopefully all of our viewers got a lot out of it. And I'll wish you the best moving forward. And thank you again for being with us today.
No, thank you so much, Howard. It's great to be here.
Appreciate it.